Hey book readers, it's Throwback Thursday, so put away your pagers, grab your favorite Beanie Baby, and chillax while I share my 12 favorite books published in the 1990s. They're all that and a bag of chips. Up first is Nightfall by Isaac Asimov, which was published in 1990. This is one of those books I think about all the time, and I need to reread it soon. It was published as a short story originally in 1941, but was later adapted with Robert Silverberg into a full book, and then published in 1990. What if you lived on a world that was sunny 24/7, where darkness was something unnatural, inspiring feelings of absolute terror? This speculative sci-fi novel creates that world, and then drops the bombshell that every couple thousand years, the planet goes dark, chaos ensues, and this cycle just repeats itself. But the good news is that this time they know it's coming, so they can avoid the mistakes of the past. Or can they? Asimov examines the psychological and societal impacts the coming darkness has on the unique people of this planet. He digs into fear, hope, the power of knowledge, and the relationship between science and religion. I enjoyed how the characters uncovered the history of their planet through archaeology and religious texts, and then they have to race to figure out what to do with this information. It's a gripping story with a neat what-if scenario. Up next is Loose Balls by Terry Pluto from 1990. I spoke about this one on my list of favorite sports books, and I'm going to talk about it here as well because it's just that good. The NBA wouldn't be the basketball league it is today without the influence of the American Basketball Association, also known as the ABA, which was a colorful and chaotic league around from the late 60s to the mid-70s. Loose Balls is basically an oral history of the ABA, with in-depth interviews from players, coaches, owners, and other important figures in the league. At its heart, this is a story about characters and larger-than-life personalities, with the ABA essentially creating modern-day NBA superstars with those millions of Instagram followers. This book captures one of the craziest, most turbulent sports leagues in US sports history, with strange, unbelievable stories that, whether you're a fan of basketball or not, you'll love. Third on my list is Heir to the Empire by Timothy Zahn, and this is from 1991. I'm no Star Wars fanboy. I've only ever really dipped my toes in this universe's literary waters a couple of times before, but I enjoyed this novel from the Star Wars Expanded Universe. Set in a galaxy far, far away, 5 years after the events of Return of the Jedi, this book features some of our favorite Star Wars characters like Luke, Leia, and Han Solo. But we're also introduced to the new star of the Star Wars universe, Grand Admiral Thrawn, a sensational new character that I would enjoy no matter the surroundings, Star Wars or not. Thrawn is a brilliant strategist leading what's left of the Galactic Empire in a campaign against the New Republic. He's creative, cunning, and always thinking 2 steps ahead of everyone else. It's nice that Zahn infused some brains over brawn into this book, showing what a genius can achieve simply by using his alien noodle. It has a fast pace, a good mix of old and new characters, and the rich world building that you'd expect from the Star Wars franchise. And I'd recommend it to die-hard or casual Star Wars fans. It helps to know the chronology and political backdrop, of course, but it's not 100% required to have a good lightsaber-wielding time. Next on my list is Doomsday book by Connie Willis, and this is from 1992. In the near future, the main character Kivrin is a historian who wants to study the Middle Ages in depth, and thanks to time travel, she can. So Kivrin sets out to record what she experiences all the way back in 1320. However, after she's sent back in time, all heck is breaking loose in the present as a pandemic has begun. This pandemic also makes it difficult for those involved in Kivrin's mission, like her mentor, Mr. Dunworthy, to determine if Kivrin is safe and sound in the past or not. So those in the present are racing against the clock to calculate exactly where and when Kivrin arrived in the past and rescue her before she's stuck there in the Middle Ages forever. Meanwhile, Kivrin is dealing with a whole host of problems in the 1300s, helping those around her as much as possible while trying to figure out how to get herself back home. While it moves along at a snail's pace sometimes, it teases you into reading the book more and more because you think the defining action of the book might just happen on the next page or in the next chapter. It's great like that. Another book from 1992 that made it on my list is All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy. If you want a good old cowboy western set in Texas in the 1940s, this right here is a winner, but it's also more than a straightforward story. Sure, it's about the teenage protagonist John Grady, who gets mixed up with a horse thief, tries to establish himself as a man, and experiences the ups and downs of young love. And yes, it blends adventure, drama, and a dash of romance. However, the rugged atmosphere is what stood out to me. And I don't think it's just because I live in Texas. The vibe is dusty and rough around the edges, perfectly reflecting the novel itself. Also, it's weird to say that despite no quotation marks, hardly any commas, run-on sentences, and huge chapters, the writing is flawless, precise, poetic. McCarthy is a master who fuses a stirring tale and brilliant prose to capture the grueling life of vaqueros on the border. Next up is The Merro Tree by Katie Waitman, and this is from 1997. Here's a sci-fi fantasy with topics you don't see very often in this genre, which maybe is why it's not extremely well known. It examines the role of art and artists, as well as the threat of censorship. Now, that being said, there are plenty of sci-fi boxes that are checked, and the scope of this book's world is amazing. The book revolves around Mick of Vizania, the galaxy's greatest performance master. Basically, he's the most amazing artist of all time in a number of mediums, including singing and dancing. Michael Jackson's got nothing on Mick. But after Mick performs a band dance, he's facing the prospect of execution. I know it might sound like a lame galactic Broadway soap opera, but trust me, it's fantastic. Especially the way the book delves into Mick's past, training, and love life as he prepares for the galaxy's biggest trial of all time. Up next is a twofer with Game of Thrones and A Clash of Clans by George R.R. Martin, which are from 1996 and 1998. Believe it or not, there was a time when the books in the A Song of Ice and Fire series were coming out every couple of years. Crazy, I know, right? But that was a long time ago, back in the 90s. Now, anyone who reads the fantasy genre or watches TV is probably aware of these books and their content, so I won't rehash the details. You know the story. The Iron Throne, the Wall, Lannisters, Starks, Winter's coming, yada yada yada. But I will say that we probably should have seen the slowdown in production from George R.R. Martin coming. Before A Game of Thrones was published in 96, his last full novel, not a novella or collection of short stories, was published 13 years before this point, in 1983. The 90s was a golden era for the fantasy genre. In addition to this series starting, several others kicked off, like The Wheel of Time, His Dark Materials, Farseer, all of which I still need to read. And then there was the next series on my list, the one and only global phenomenon of Harry Potter. Written by J.K. Rowling, The Sorcerer's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, and Prisoner of Azkaban were all published in the 1990s, in 97, 98, and 99 respectively. Again, you probably know the story here because it's one of the most popular and beloved book series of all time, so I'm not going to get into the plot or the characters. But if reading as a pastime was ever becoming a smoldering ember, Harry Potter stoked the fire again into a blazing inferno. I mean, book releases for the Harry Potter series became a thing. Since you couldn't just order a book off of Amazon, crowds of kids and grown-up readers waited in long lines for the midnight releases of these books. It was Muggle madness. But that just shows you how crazy Potterheads were for The Boy Who Lived. And the books still hold up, of course. They transport you to an intricate, magical world that's easy to get lost in. And last on my list is Stardust by Neil Gaiman from 1999. I saw the movie before I read the book, so I already knew what to expect from this YA fantasy novel, and I was pretty sure that I'd love it, and I did. It's a spellbinding fairy tale that ventures from the small human town of Wall into the world of fairy, following a young man named Tristan Thorne who's gone into fairy to retrieve a fallen star for the girl he loves. It's a fun book with charming characters, including witches, pirates, and mythical creatures. But this fairy tale isn't just for kids. It's got magic, romance, and deeper topics like destiny. Gaiman's lyrical writing is so easy to read. He shepherds the reader through the tale, never dawdling and never rushing. It's the perfect pace, especially for a fantasy book with plenty to stop and gawk at. Booyah! That's the 411 on 12 books from the 1990s that are the bomb. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment with your favorite books from the decade. Happy reading.